I think it's important that when we define programmatic, we clearly outline what programmatic technology and what strategies that are enabled by programmatic technology can ultimately do. Programmatic itself is nothing more than infrastructure, right? It's a series of technologies and platforms that plug into each other that let us do something new. It's what we build on top of it that really matters the most. So at its core, if I'm a brand advertiser who only cares about reaching adults 18 to 49, I can use programmatic technology to ultimately do that, right? It's just a way of buying. The important part is we need to then understand and dissect what those unique differentiators and sort of opportunities that programmatic brings to us, which is really important. So starting to move away from proxies, from clicks, and even from just enormous age bands, and starting to really focus in on audiences that drive value, not just from a media perspective, but from a real-world sales perspective, from a brand lift perspective. Those are the things that programmatic really empowers and that we need to start planning around. So programmatic itself is not a strategy. In fact, in the future, we believe that all media is going to be programmatic. It's the strategies that you build on top of it and the way that a brand uses data and media to more effectively drive business results that really matter. We're hearing a lot more about closing the loop and closed loop marketing and closed loop ecosystems, and it has the potential to, like a lot of things in programmatic, be really confusing, but it's actually really straightforward. The idea of closed loop marketing or closed loop ecosystem is to use data to identify audiences that are important, and then use that same source of data to ultimately measure real-world business results. So a key example of this would be for retailers, increasingly using both their first-party offline sales data, so their loyalty programs, their credit card subscribers, as well as some third-party data, so for example, data that's available from people like MasterCard and Cardlytics, to not only help them identify the audiences that are important in a digital ecosystem, but then understand how they actually interact, perform, and ultimately buy from a brand in the long term. And what the sort of key piece of this is that it's a shift away from media metrics towards business metrics, right? So we're not so much concerned with clicks now as we are with sales and being able to prove that digital media is really driving value. And it's going to be one of those things that we think are going to really help programmatic transform advertising from being a cost center and something of a black hole for lots of brands to being something that can drive meaningful business results in the long term. We really do believe that you can boil down effective programmatically enabled strategies into four key steps. The first, and maybe the most important and seemingly simple, is to build an effective audience strategy. When we look at an audience strategy, that means having a creative plan, a measurement plan, and a targeting plan that all make sense together, that are going to drive towards your desired business outcomes. The second is really to collect all the data that is important to help enable this. So, if you are a CPG client, this means being able to capture in-store purchase data from wherever you need to, as well as key things like brand consideration and general brand segmentation as well. So being able to put all that data in one place to understand an audience and segment an audience properly is what you need to transition between that strategy phase and the execution phase. The third step is to then actually launch and find those audiences across a premium marketplace. The programmatic marketplace is enormous, and there's an incredible amount of inventory in there. But in reality, there's only really a short tail of value for different clients, and we need to understand where and how to ultimately reach those users in the right media environment, right, to be able to stitch together that proper consumer journey. And the last is to measure effectively. If your main goal as a business is to drive towards in-store sales, we need to make sure that we're effectively set up to not only measure in-store sales, but optimize accordingly. And that's that closed loop that we're kind of talking about before, where that feeds back up into our strategies, we take those learnings, and then are able to adapt going forward. The ability to react in real time means that we need to learn a lot of new behaviors in order to be able to take advantage of what programmatic technology is really able to do for us. And that ability to be flexible and to be nimble, to adapt to what's happening, is critical for brands. It's one of those things that's actually really difficult as well, because it means changing an entire behavior that has been learned of year-long planning cycles, etc. So that ability to sort of get into market, experiment, and potentially fail fast is something that we need to continuously indoctrinate and develop within brands. The good news is that because we're able to get those results back in real time, we're able to then adapt, make those course corrections, and move forward in an effective way. So I think as brands become more able to take advantage of some of these things moving forward, it's going to be really revolutionary in terms of a media experience. I think one area where it's probably most interesting is around this idea of content distribution and the integration of content into the media landscape. So some people call it native, some people call it sponsored content, some people advertorial, but at the end of the day, what we're seeing from large publishers and their ability to use data and media as well as a distribution channel through programmatic technology to actually amplify content that's generated in near real time is really going to change the way that we think about marketing in the future.